Hi, welcome to the Aftermath Tales. Ready for a new story? Very well, let's begin.
I should have known something was wrong when Diana smiled at me across the reception hall, her perfect teeth gleaming like a predator's, while my 5-year-old son sat at home, wondering why he couldn't watch Uncle Angus get married. But let me start from the beginning, because the signs were there all along. I just chose to ignore them. My name is Janet Easton Sanders, and I've always been the peacekeeper in my family. Maybe it comes from running a small business with my husband Henry. When your livelihood depends on keeping customers happy, you develop a talent for smoothing over rough edges. Henry handles our marketing and shipping while I spend my days elbow-deep in clay, crafting personalized trinkets and gifts for clients who can afford to pay premium prices for something truly unique. Our customers come from money, the kind of people who commission custom pieces for their charity galas and anniversary parties. We've built a solid reputation over the past 4 years, enough that we could buy our little house in the suburbs and give our son Jacob everything he needs. Jacob is 5 years old, bright as a penny, and happens to have mild hearing loss. He's been wearing hearing aids since he was 2, and they work so well that most people don't even realize he has any hearing difficulties. Jacob speaks clearly and confidently. You'd never know he was anything other than a typical chatty 5-year-old. We learned some basic sign language when he was first diagnosed, but he rarely needs it now, except when his hearing aids need new batteries or in very noisy environments. Henry loves making Jacob laugh with his elaborate stories about dinosaurs fighting robots, complete with sound effects that Jacob can hear perfectly well. Watching them together never fails to make my heart swell. The trouble started on a Tuesday evening in March, when my parents invited us over for what Mom called a special family dinner. I should have been suspicious. Mom only dragged out the good china for major announcements or when she was trying to butter someone up for a favor. We arrived at my childhood home to find the dining room table set for 10, with Mom's best roses arranged in the center. The house had that familiar smell of lemon furniture polish and the lavender potpourri that Grandma Pauline insisted on keeping in every room. Jacob immediately ran to hug my parents, chattering excitedly in his mixture of spoken words and signs about the new dinosaur book Henry had bought him. "Where's that great-grandson of mine?" came a voice from the living room, and Jacob's face absolutely lit up. Grandma Pauline emerged from her favorite armchair, moving slowly, but with the regal bearing she'd maintained well into her 80s. She was the family matriarch in every sense of the word, sharp as a tack, opinionated as hell, and wealthy enough that everyone in the family treated her words like gospel. Pauline Easton had been widowed young and turned her late husband's modest insurance policy into a real estate empire through sheer determination and an eye for undervalued properties. She'd bought the family home outright 30 years ago, and my parents had been living there as her tenants/caretakers ever since. Not that she needed much care. At 83, Grandma Pauline still managed her own investments and had opinions about everything from politics to the proper way to fold fitted sheets. She only had one child, my father, which made her relationship with Angus and me even more precious to her. But her soft spot was Jacob. From the moment he was born, she doted on that boy like he was made of spun gold. "Great, Grandma!" Jacob called out enthusiastically, running to her for his customary hug. "What did you learn today, my smart boy?" she asked, settling back into her chair with Jacob perched on the arm beside her. She'd been incredibly supportive when Jacob got his hearing aids, declaring that no great-grandchild of hers would ever be held back by anything, and she was always eager to hear about his adventures. Jacob launched into an excited explanation of his day, chattering rapidly as he told her about the art project he'd made at preschool. His speech was clear and animated, just like any other 5-year-old sharing his day. Grandma Pauline listened with the serious attention she gave to all of Jacob's stories, asking follow-up questions and praising his creativity. That's when my brother Angus walked in with a woman I'd only met twice before. Angus is 2 years younger than me, but he's always been my parents' golden child. Where I was practical and studious, Angus was charming and spontaneous. Where I married my college boyfriend and started a business, Angus traveled Europe and changed careers every 18 months. My parents called it finding himself. Grandma Pauline called it avoiding responsibility, though she said it with more fondness than criticism. Diana Smith was exactly the kind of woman my mother had always hoped Angus would bring home. Tall, blonde, with that effortless elegance that comes from good genetics and expensive skincare. She had worked in marketing for some tech startup until recently. She'd quit when she and Angus got serious, claiming she wanted to focus on their relationship and future together. Of course, having researched the Easton family's wealth beforehand probably made that decision easier. "Everyone sit down," Mom announced, practically vibrating with excitement. "Angus has something wonderful to share." Angus grinned and pulled Diana close to him. "Diana and I are engaged." The eruption of congratulations and squealing from Mom nearly drowned out Jacob asking Henry what engaged meant. While the adults hugged and exclaimed over Diana's impressively sized diamond ring, Henry knelt down to explain marriage to our son in simple terms. "Uncle Angus is going to have a wedding ceremony," Henry explained. "Like Mommy and Daddy did. Diana will become part of our family." Jacob clapped his hands together excitedly and ran over to hug Angus around the waist. My brother picked him up easily, grinning as Jacob chattered congratulations in his enthusiastic 5-year-old way. Grandma Pauline had remained seated during the excitement, but I caught her studying Diana with the sharp-eyed assessment she usually reserved for potential real estate investments. Her expression was carefully neutral, but I could see the wheels turning behind her eyes. "When's the wedding?" I asked, genuinely happy for my brother despite my reservations about Diana. "October 15th, Diana answered, her hand possessively on Angus's arm. "We're planning something elegant, intimate, about 200 guests at the Riverside Manor." "The Riverside Manor!" Mom gasped. "Oh, Diana, that's going to be absolutely gorgeous and expensive," she added with a meaningful look at Grandma Pauline. Diana's smile grew brighter. "Actually, we were hoping, Grandma Pauline, you were so generous with Janet and Henry's wedding." Ah, there it was. Diana had done her homework and knew exactly who controlled the family purse strings. Grandma Pauline raised one perfectly penciled eyebrow. "You're asking me to pay for your wedding?" "Not asking," Diana said quickly. "Hoping, as a wedding gift, the way you did for Janet and Henry." It was true. Grandma Pauline had paid for our entire wedding, from the venue to the flowers to the photographer. It had been her gift to us, she'd said, because young people shouldn't start their marriages buried in debt. "I see." Grandma Pauline's expression was unreadable. "And what kind of budget are we discussing?" Diana's eyes lit up. "Well, the Riverside Manor is $40,000 for the venue and catering. Then there's flowers, photography, the dress, music." $60,000, Angus said quietly. "All in, we're looking at about $60,000. The room went very quiet. Even my parents looked stunned. My wedding had cost less than half that amount. Grandma Pauline was silent for a long moment, studying the young couple. I could practically see her calculating not just the financial cost, but the cost to family harmony if she refused. "That's a considerable sum," she said finally. "It's a once-in-a-lifetime celebration," Diana said earnestly, "and it would mean everything to have family support. I know how important family is to the Eastons." Another loaded statement. Diana was definitely playing this strategically. "Family is important," Grandma Pauline agreed slowly, though I caught the slight emphasis on the word family. "Very important. I'll pay for your wedding." Diana's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Really? Oh, Grandma Pauline, thank you so much. This means everything." "However," Grandma Pauline continued, and the single word cut through Diana's enthusiasm like ice water, "I do have one question about your guest list." "Our guest list? Will it include the entire family? All the cousins, the nieces and nephews?" Diana's smile flickered slightly. "Well, we've decided to have an adults-only celebration. No children. When you're spending that much on a venue, you want everything to be perfect, and children can be so unpredictable." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. I watched Grandma Pauline's face carefully, noting the way her eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "Adults only," Grandma Pauline repeated, her voice carefully neutral. It's really not a child-friendly environment, Diana continued, apparently oblivious to the shift in atmosphere. The manor has all those antiques and water features, and evening weddings are naturally more sophisticated when they're adults only. Jacob was still perched on the arm of Grandma Pauline's chair, happily playing with a small toy dinosaur he'd pulled from his pocket, completely unaware that he was being discussed. "I see," Grandma Pauline said finally. "So Jacob won't be attending his uncle's wedding. Well, no, but he's so young. He won't even remember. He'll remember that his family had a celebration and he wasn't welcome." Diana's laugh was forced. "Oh, I'm sure he'll understand. Children are so resilient, and really, with his condition, he might not even enjoy all the noise and commotion." The silence that followed was deafening. Jacob looked up from his dinosaur, sensing the tension in the room even though he could hear the conversation perfectly well through his hearing aids. "Why is everyone so quiet?" he asked Henry, his voice clear and curious. "Just grown-up talk," Henry said gently. "Keep playing, buddy." Grandma Pauline watched this exchange with laser focus, her expression growing colder by the second. "His condition," she repeated slowly. "You know what I mean," Diana said, clearly flustered. "The hearing aids, and he might get overwhelmed in such a formal setting. Some children with disabilities just don't do well at elegant events." "I see. And what about the other children in the family? Your decision affects them too." "Of course," Diana said, seeming to regain her confidence. "It's across the board. No children. Fair and consistent." Grandma Pauline nodded slowly. "Well then, I suppose that's settled. $60,000 for an adults-only wedding." She didn't say she was reconsidering, but something in her tone made my stomach clench with unease. The rest of the dinner conversation was strained, with Diana clearly confused about why her engagement announcement had gone sideways and everyone else walking on eggshells around Grandma Pauline's obvious displeasure. It was during dessert that Diana made her second mistake. "Oh, Janet, I almost forgot," she said, apparently deciding to move past the awkward guest list conversation. "Mom mentioned that you do custom work, clay trinkets and things?" "Personalized gifts?" I corrected automatically. "We specialize in high-end custom pieces." "Perfect." Diana's eyes lit up with what I mistook for genuine enthusiasm. "Wedding favors are so expensive, and since we'll need to watch our budget with the venue costs, would you consider making our wedding favors as your wedding gift to us? It would mean so much to have something handmade by family." Henry's warning squeeze came immediately. We'd been burned before by family members who thought wedding gift meant thousands of dollars in free labor. But this was different. This was Angus's wedding, and Grandma Pauline was watching this conversation with obvious interest. "We'd be honored," I said, ignoring Henry's sharp look. "What did you have in mind?" "Something elegant," Diana said immediately, as if she'd been planning this conversation. "Sophisticated. 200 pieces. Nothing that screams homemade, if you know what I mean. Our guests are used to fine things." 200 pieces for a wedding gift. I did quick math in my head. Even basic custom clay work would cost us at least $1,000 in materials alone, not counting the dozens of hours of labor. "That's a substantial order," Henry said carefully. "What's your timeline?" "October 15th, Diana said brightly. "So we have plenty of time. 7 months is ages." 7 months to design, create, and finish 200 custom wedding favors while running our existing business and caring for a 5-year-old. I felt a headache starting behind my eyes. Grandma Pauline leaned forward slightly. "Diana, dear, when you say Janet and Henry would provide the wedding favors, you mean as their complete wedding gift to you?" "Exactly," Diana beamed. "Family helping family. It's so much more meaningful than store-bought favors." "And the materials costs?" "Oh, well." Diana waved her hand vaguely. "I'm sure it won't be much. Clay is pretty cheap, right?" I saw Grandma Pauline's eyes narrow dangerously, and I realized she was cataloging every presumptuous word that came out of Diana's mouth. "Let me think about some design options," I said quickly, before the conversation could escalate further. "I'll put together some samples and we can go from there." "Wonderful," Diana clapped her hands together. "This is going to be so special. Handmade favors are so much more meaningful than something store-bought." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of wedding planning chatter and Mom showing Diana old photo albums. Jacob fell asleep against Grandma Pauline's shoulder around 9, worn out from all the excitement and attention. As we gathered our things to leave, Angus pulled me aside in the front hallway. "Thanks for offering to do the wedding favors," he said quietly. "I know it's a lot to ask." "It's not asking when it's freely offered," I replied, though part of me wondered if it had really been freely offered or if Diana had maneuvered me into volunteering. Angus smiled, but there was something tired in his expression. "Diana has very specific ideas about how she wants things. Don't take it personally if she's particular about the details." It was the first hint that my brother might be having his own doubts about his fiancée's demands, but I dismissed it as pre-wedding jitters. As we loaded Jacob into the car, Grandma Pauline appeared at the front door. "Janet, dear," she called. "A word?" I walked back to the porch, leaving Henry to buckle Jacob into his car seat. "That girl," Grandma Pauline said without preamble, "has no idea what family means." "Diana? She's just excited about the wedding. She's a user." Grandma Pauline's voice was flat. "Mark my words, that girl will take everything you're willing to give and then ask for more. And she's already shown her true colors about Jacob." "I can handle Diana." Grandma Pauline studied my face for a long moment. "Can you? Because from where I sat tonight, she manipulated you into providing thousands of dollars worth of free labor in about 5 minutes." I wanted to argue, but she wasn't wrong. "Jacob is family," she said quietly. "Don't let anyone make you forget that." The first sample took me 3 weeks to complete. I decided on delicate ceramic hearts, each one hand-painted in soft ivory with their names and wedding date inscribed in elegant gold script. The hearts were small enough to fit in a guest's palm, but substantial enough to feel valuable, with a subtle pearl-like finish that caught the light beautifully. I was proud of them. They struck the perfect balance between handmade charm and sophisticated elegance, exactly what I thought Diana had requested. Diana hated them. "They're sweet," she said when I presented the sample at her and Angus's apartment the following week. She turned the heart over in her hands, her expression carefully neutral. "But they're a little simple?" I was hoping for something with more impact. "Impact?" I asked. "You know, something that screams expensive wedding. These look like something you'd find at a craft fair." The words hit like a slap. I'd spent hours perfecting the glaze, hand-painting each detail with a brush so fine it cost $40 to replace. These weren't craft fair trinkets. They were professional quality custom pieces that would retail for at least $25 each in any boutique. "What would you prefer?" I asked, keeping my voice level. Diana's face brightened. I was thinking something more dramatic, maybe miniature vases with real flowers dried inside, and gold accents, lots of gold. Something that looks like it cost a fortune. I nodded and took notes, my heart sinking as I calculated the material costs for what she was describing. Real gold leaf wasn't cheap, and creating 200 miniature vases would require significantly more clay and kiln time. "Also," Diana added, almost as an afterthought, "could they be bigger? These hearts are cute, but I want something substantial, something people will actually keep and display." Bigger meant more materials, more time, more money. But I nodded and promised to have new samples ready in 2 weeks. Over the following months, Diana rejected sample after sample. The miniature vases were too overwhelming. Photo frames were too basic. Custom jewelry boxes were too expensive looking, a criticism that baffled me entirely. Each rejection came with new demands, different shapes, different colors, different materials, different everything. By August, I'd created 8 different sample designs and spent over $1,000 on materials that would never be used. Diana's latest obsession was custom ceramic picture frames with embedded engagement photos, complete with gold leaf trim and silk-lined presentation boxes. "These are perfect," she finally gushed in late August, turning the revised sample over in her hands. Elegant, sophisticated, personal. Exactly what I had in mind from the beginning. I bit my tongue to keep from pointing out that this was essentially a variation of the third design I'd shown her 5 months earlier. 200 pieces, I confirmed, with gold leaf accents, custom photo printing, and silk-lined presentation boxes. "Yes, absolutely. And Janet?" She leaned forward conspiratorially. "This is going to be such a beautiful wedding gift. I know it's a lot of work, but family helps family, right?" The final cost would be nearly $5,000 in materials alone, plus 6 weeks of full-time work, for a wedding our son wasn't allowed to attend. But I agreed, because she was going to be family, and because I'd invested too much to back out now. Diana never offered to pay for a single material. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a blur of 18-hour days, gold leaf, and growing resentment. Henry and I worked every spare moment, turning our garage into a production line that would have impressed any small manufacturing operation. Jacob helped where he could, carefully sorting completed frames and testing different ribbon-tying techniques with the focus of a master craftsman. Our regular business suffered. We had to turn down several high-paying custom orders because we simply didn't have time. Henry calculated that between lost income and direct costs, Diana's wedding favors were costing us nearly $7,000. $7,000 for a couple who claimed money was tight while Diana shopped for designer shoes, and Angus bought a new watch for the wedding. As I packed the final batch of favors into their silk-lined boxes, each one tied with a perfect blush pink ribbon, I had to admit they were beautiful. They looked like favors from a wedding with an unlimited budget, elegant, sophisticated, and obviously expensive, which, given what we'd invested in them, they were. The wedding was in 2 days. Jacob was excited about his sleepover at Grandma and Grandpa Sanders' house, completely unaware that he was the only child in the extended family not invited to witness his uncle's marriage. 2 days, and this whole nightmare would be over. The morning of the wedding dawned crisp and clear, one of those perfect October days that makes you believe in magic. Henry and I dropped Jacob off at his grandparents' house early, armed with his favorite movies, art supplies, and enough snacks to keep him happy for the day. "Have fun at Uncle Angus's wedding," Grandma Sanders said as she hugged Jacob goodbye. She'd been incredibly supportive since Jacob got his hearing aids, always making sure to speak clearly and face him when talking, though with his well-fitted hearing aids, he rarely had trouble understanding anyone. "Why can't I come?" Jacob asked, a question he'd been asking all week. "It's a grown-up party," I explained for the 100th time. "But you're going to have a special day here with Grandma and Grandpa." Jacob seemed satisfied with this explanation, especially when Grandpa promised to teach him how to make his famous chocolate chip pancakes. "Tell Uncle Angus I said congratulations," Jacob said aloud, his speech clear despite his hearing aids. "And tell him I made him a picture." He handed me a carefully folded piece of construction paper, a drawing of stick figures in fancy clothes standing under a rainbow. Uncle Angus and Diana were labeled in Jacob's careful kindergarten handwriting, with a heart drawn between them. My throat tightened as I tucked the drawing into my purse. Maybe Angus would want to see it later, even if his bride had decided Jacob himself wasn't worthy of attending. Henry and I drove to the venue in relative silence, the back of our car loaded with carefully packed boxes of wedding favors. 200 perfect miniature photo frames that had consumed our lives and our savings for the better part of 6 months. The Riverside Manor was exactly as elegant as Diana had promised. The ceremony was being held in a garden pavilion overlooking the river, with reception to follow in the grand ballroom. Everything was decorated in shades of ivory and blush, with cascading arrangements of white roses and eucalyptus exactly as Diana had specified. It was, objectively, going to be a beautiful wedding. We arrived early to help with setup, carrying our boxes of favors to a designated table near the entrance to the ballroom. Diana's wedding planner, a harried-looking woman with a clipboard and a headset, directed us with brisk efficiency. "Favors go on the escort card table," she announced. "We'll have servers distribute them during the cocktail hour transition." Henry and I spent 20 minutes carefully arranging 200 silk-lined boxes on the elegantly draped table, each one positioned just so to create an attractive display. The favors looked stunning against the ivory linens, exactly as expensive and sophisticated as Diana had demanded. "They're gorgeous," the wedding planner admitted, pausing in her frenzied preparations to admire our work. "Custom? Made by the bride's future sister-in-law," Henry said with justifiable pride, though I caught the slight edge in his voice. "Lucky bride. These must have cost a fortune." If only she knew. With the favors arranged, we had an hour before the ceremony began. Henry went to find the men's room while I stepped outside to get some fresh air and collect my thoughts. That's when I saw them. Children. 3 of them running across the manicured lawn in their wedding finery, laughing as they chased each other around the garden sculptures. A little girl in a pale pink dress that perfectly matched the wedding colors. 2 boys in miniature suits, probably around Jacob's age, their ties already slightly askew from playing. I stood frozen, watching these children play in the space where my son had been deemed unwelcome. "Janet!" I turned to see my mother approaching, dressed in her mother-of-the-groom outfit, a sophisticated navy dress that she'd been planning for months. Behind her were my aunt and uncle, my cousins Sarah and Mike with their spouses, and, notably, no children except for the 3 currently playing on the lawn. "Don't the grounds look beautiful?" Mom gushed, gesturing toward the garden where the children were still playing. "Diana has such exquisite taste." "Mom?" I said carefully, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. "Who are those children?" She followed my gaze to the kids on the lawn, and I watched her face change as she realized what I was seeing. "Oh," she said quietly, Those are Diana's sister's children, and her cousin's little boy." The world tilted slightly on its axis. "I thought this was an adults-only wedding." "Well, yes, but what, Mom?" My voice was getting louder, and several other early-arriving guests were starting to glance our way. "You told me Jacob couldn't come because it was adults only, so why are there 3 children running around the venue? Janet, honey, let's not do this today. It's Angus's wedding day." More family members were gathering now, drawn by the obvious tension in our group. My cousin David, his wife Lisa, my dad's cousin Uncle Frank, all of them childless for the day because they'd followed the no children rule that apparently only applied to some families. "This is unbelievable," David said when the situation was explained to him. "We paid $200 for a babysitter for the weekend because Diana said kids weren't welcome." "Maybe there's been a misunderstanding," Mom said desperately, clearly trying to defuse the situation before it exploded. "What kind of misunderstanding?" I asked. "Either children are welcome or they're not. There's no middle ground here." That's when Henry appeared at my elbow, having clearly caught the tail end of the conversation from my tone. "What's going on?" "The wedding isn't adults only," I said, my voice hollow. "It's just our family's kids are not invited." Before anyone could respond, Uncle Frank was striding toward the venue entrance, his face set in the kind of expression that had made him legendary in family disputes. The ceremony was beautiful. I'll give Diana credit for that. She looked stunning in her dress, a flowing confection of silk and lace that probably cost more than our car. Angus looked handsome in his tuxedo, beaming as he watched his bride walk down the aisle. But I sat in the 3rd row with Henry and my increasingly angry extended family, watching Diana's sister's children scatter rose petals and thinking about Jacob at his grandparents' house, probably covered in pancake batter and completely unaware that he'd been specifically excluded from a family celebration. Uncle Frank had found Angus before the ceremony, and whatever conversation they'd had left my brother looking shaken and Diana looking furious. But the show had to go on. 200 guests, a $60,000 venue, and a photographer capturing every moment. When Angus and Diana were pronounced husband and wife, I clapped along with everyone else and tried to summon genuine happiness for my brother. But it was during the cocktail hour that everything truly fell apart. I was standing near the favor table when I spotted Diana holding court near the bar, accepting compliments on her dress and the elegant venue. I needed answers. I walked over to Diana, Henry close behind me. "Diana," I said, my voice carrying just enough to draw the attention of nearby guests. "Janet?" Diana turned with her brightest smile. "Isn't this just the most perfect day? Everyone's been raving about the wedding favors." "I need to ask you something," I said. I gestured toward Diana's sister's children, who were now sitting at a table near the dance floor. "Why are there children at your adults-only wedding?" Diana's smile flickered. "What do you mean?" "Those children, at your adults-only wedding, the one that Jacob wasn't allowed to attend." The crowd around us was growing, guests drawn by the increasingly tense conversation. "Those are different," she said finally. "Different how?" "They're my immediate family," she said, lifting her chin. You see, my family always comes first. Other families are less important. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. I heard several sharp intakes of breath from the growing crowd of listeners. Other families, I repeated slowly. Like mine? Look, Janet, Diana said, her voice taking on an edge. I planned this wedding for my family and Angus's important relatives. I didn't want it overshadowed by people feeling sorry for that deaf kid of yours with those hearing aids. It just draws attention away from what should be a perfect day. The silence that followed was absolute. That's when I heard the tap of a cane behind me. "Excuse me," came Grandma Pauline's voice, cold as winter steel. "Did I hear you correctly?" Diana turned, her face going white as she realized who had been listening. "Grandma Pauline, You said," Grandma Pauline continued, her voice carrying clearly across the silent crowd, "that my great-grandson would overshadow your wedding. That people would feel sorry for a deaf child." "I didn't mean it like that," Diana tried to explain. "How did you mean it? And did you just say that your family always comes first, while other families are less important?" Diana was trembling now. It's my wedding day. I wanted everything to be perfect." "Perfect," Grandma Pauline repeated. "Well, Diana, let me tell you about perfection. Perfect families don't exclude disabled children. Perfect daughters-in-law don't insult their husband's relatives, and perfect weddings don't get funded by the people you've just insulted." Diana's face went ashen. "What do you mean?" I will not be paying for this celebration," Grandma Pauline said. "You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm quite serious. You see, Diana, I don't fund weddings for people who think my great-grandson is an embarrassment, who think their family is more important than mine." The crowd had grown larger, and I spotted several people I recognized as business associates of my family, including Uncle Mark, my father's cousin and the second most influential member of the Easton family after Grandma Pauline. He ran the largest construction company in town and was Diana's father's biggest client. Uncle Mark stepped forward, his face dark with anger. "Diana, is this true? You excluded our family's children while welcoming your own?" "Uncle Mark, please, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," he said coldly. "I understand that you think some family members are more important than others. You just insulted my family, our family. Well, let me tell you what's important to me, loyalty to the Eastons, and you've just shown you have none." He turned to Angus. "Boy, I've watched you grow up. Your family has always stood together. If your wife can't understand that, then maybe you need to reconsider what's important to you." Diana's parents had pushed through the crowd, their faces pale with dawning horror. "Diana Marie Smith," her mother hissed, "what have you done?" "I planned a beautiful wedding." "You insulted the Easton family," her father exploded, gesturing toward Uncle Mark. "Do you have any idea what this means for our business?" Uncle Mark nodded grimly. "I'm afraid I can't continue doing business with people who disrespect the Easton family. Consider our contracts canceled, effective immediately." Diana's mother turned to Grandma Pauline with desperate eyes. "Please, Mrs. Easton, our daughter doesn't speak for our family." "Doesn't she?" Grandma Pauline asked. "Because she seems quite confident in her opinions about which family members matter." Angus pushed through the crowd, his face ashen. "Grandma Pauline, please." "Angus, you're a good boy, but your wife just told me that my great-grandson is an embarrassment and that her family is more important than mine. That is unforgivable," Grandma Pauline said coldly. "We can work this out," Angus said desperately. "No, we cannot. Diana has made her position clear, and I've made mine clear. I'm not paying for this wedding." Diana found her voice again, and it came out as a screech. "You can't do this! We have contracts!" "Contracts that you expected me to honor. Well, I won't be honoring anything. I didn't sign any contracts," Grandma said smugly. The crowd was buzzing now, whispers and shocked murmurs spreading like wildfire. That's when my parents approached, looking mortified. "Mother," my father said quietly, "perhaps we should discuss this privately." "Privately?" Grandma Pauline's voice rose, cutting through the crowd noise. "So you can make excuses for letting this person insult your grandson? Your daughter and her family have been manipulated and used for months, and you said nothing." She turned to address the crowd, her voice carrying clearly across the silent venue. "Since Diana has made it clear that some families are more important than others, let me be equally clear. This girl will never be welcome in my home. We will not accept this kind of human being in our family. Angus, you are my grandson and I love you, but as long as you're married to someone who insults my family and thinks my Jacob is an embarrassment, you won't be receiving any inheritance from me." The gasps from the crowd were audible. Everyone knew Grandma Pauline was worth millions. "And you," she turned to my parents, "clearly need to learn what loyalty to family means. I want you out of my house by the end of the month." "Mother," my father started, "I'm giving the house to Janet and Henry. They understand what family means. You can move into the smaller property on Elm Street, also mine, so don't worry about rent. And Janet, that large backyard space, perfect for expanding your business." The crowd was in chaos now, guests murmuring and staring as the most spectacular family meltdown in Riverside Manor history unfolded. That's when Henry stepped forward. "Hey, Diana," he said, his voice calm, but carrying clearly across the crowd. "Since my son isn't important family to you, then we don't see you as family at all." And then, in front of 200 horrified guests, my husband walked over to the favor table and picked up one of our beautiful silk-lined boxes. He opened it carefully, removed the elegant photo frame that had taken me hours to create, and dropped it on the floor. The sound of breaking clay was shockingly loud in the silence. "Henry, no!" Diana screamed, but he was already reaching for the next box. "These favors," he said conversationally as he opened another box, "cost us $7,000, our son's college fund, for a wedding he wasn't allowed to attend." Another frame hit the floor with a satisfying crash. "Because a deaf child would overshadow the bride." Crash. "Because our family isn't important." Crash. Other family members joined in. Uncle Frank grabbed a handful of boxes and began systematically destroying frames. Uncle Frank followed suit, then David, then Sarah. "Stop!" Diana was sobbing now, trying to grab boxes away from them. "Our kids matter too," Sarah shouted as she dropped a frame. $200 for a babysitter." Mike added, contributing his own frame to the growing pile of debris. The destruction continued until every single box had been opened, and every single frame had been reduced to broken pieces on the elegant venue floor. $7,000 worth of custom work, 6 months of labor, and countless hours of stress, all of it lying in ruins among the rose petals and eucalyptus. Diana was still sobbing, her perfect makeup destroyed, her wedding dress stained with tears. Angus stood beside her looking shell-shocked, while their 200 guests watched in horrified fascination. Uncle Mark surveyed the destruction with grim satisfaction. "Well, Diana, I hope you've learned something today about what it means to be part of the Easton family. We protect our own, especially our children." He turned to Grandma Pauline. "Aunt Pauline, you have my complete support. Family comes first, always." Diana's parents looked devastated, realizing their daughter had just destroyed not only her wedding but their family business as well. "Diana," her father said quietly, his voice shaking with anger, "do you understand what you've done? 20 years of building our company, and you've destroyed it in 5 minutes by insulting the Eastons." "I didn't know," Diana wailed. "I didn't know Uncle Mark had so much power. I didn't know he could destroy our business." "You didn't know because you didn't bother to learn about the family dynamics," Uncle Mark said coldly. "You knew I was family, but you never cared to understand what that meant. The Eastons stick together. When you attack one of us, you attack all of us." "You didn't know because you didn't care," Grandma Pauline added. "You cared about having an expensive wedding funded by people you consider beneath you. Well, congratulations, Diana. You got exactly what you deserved." Grandma Pauline surveyed the damage with satisfaction, then turned to address the crowd one final time. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice carrying clearly despite her age, "I regret to inform you that there will be no reception. The bride and groom seem to have encountered some financial difficulties." She turned to look directly at Diana and Angus. "Since you owe $60,000 that you don't have, I suggest you start figuring out how to pay for this disaster yourselves." As our family began to leave, I reached into my purse and pulled out the carefully folded piece of construction paper Jacob had given me that morning. I walked over to Angus, who was standing in the wreckage of his reception, looking completely devastated. "This is from Jacob," I said quietly, pressing the drawing into his hands. "He wanted you to have it." Angus unfolded the paper with trembling fingers. The stick figure drawing showed Uncle Angus and Diana under a rainbow, with a message written in Jacob's careful kindergarten handwriting. My favorite Uncle Angus, I wish I could see you on your wedding day, but I understand. I love you and I wish you have fun. Love, Jacob. I watched Angus's face crumple as he read his nephew's innocent words, words from a child who had been excluded from this day but still wanted his uncle to be happy. The child who loves his Uncle Angus. Janet, he started, his voice breaking. Keep it, I said. Maybe it'll help you remember what's actually important. With that, I turned and walked away, leaving behind the broken wedding favors, the sobbing bride, and my brother clutching a drawing from the little boy he'd allowed to be excluded from the most important day of his life. We went straight home to collect Jacob and tell him about the change in plans. The wedding ended early, I told him when we arrived at his grandparents' house. But guess what? Grandma Pauline wants to have a special family dinner tonight. Jacob's face lit up. All of us together? All the important family? Henry said back, and I saw him smile for the first time all day. 2 hours later, we were gathered around the dining table at Grandma Pauline's house, the same table where this whole mess had started 7 months ago. Grandma Pauline had called her favorite restaurant and had a full spread delivered, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, and fresh rolls that filled the house with warmth and comfort. But this time, Jacob was the guest of honor, regaling everyone with stories about his morning adventures and demonstrating the chocolate chip pancake-making technique he'd mastered with his grandparents. Uncle Mark had joined us, along with several other family members who had walked out of the reception in solidarity. There were no fancy decorations or expensive catering, just family around a table, sharing stories and laughter. "Tell me about the wedding," Jacob said to me during dinner, perched on my lap as he worked his way through Grandma Pauline's famous pot roast. "It was very fancy," I said back, "but not as much fun as this. Why did everyone come here instead of the party?" I looked around the room at my family, my real family, the ones who had stood up for my son when it mattered, and felt my heart swell with love and gratitude. "Because this is where the important family is," I said. Jacob grinned and clapped his hands together excitedly before launching into an elaborate story about the dinosaur book he'd been reading. Uncle Mark, who had been quietly observing the family dynamics all evening, leaned over to Grandma Pauline. "Aunt Pauline, you did the right thing today. That girl had no respect for what this family stands for." "Family is everything, Mark," she replied simply. "When someone attacks our children, we respond accordingly." As the evening wound down, Grandma Pauline pulled me aside. "Any regrets?" she asked. I thought about it. The months of stress, the thousands of dollars, the broken relationship with my brother, the spectacular public meltdown that would be talked about in our family for generations. "None," I said honestly. "You?" She smiled, and for the first time in months, it reached her eyes. "My dear, I haven't had that much fun since I foreclosed on the Henderson property in 1987. And Janet, I'm giving you $7,000 to cover what you spent on those wedding favors." "Grandma Pauline, no, I can't accept. I refuse. You can and you will. I won't take no for an answer. That money came out of Jacob's college fund, and I won't stand for it." Later that night, as I tucked Jacob into bed, he said one more thing. "I'm glad we had a family party tonight. It was more fun than a wedding would have been anyway. And you know what? He was absolutely right." Henry came into the kitchen 3 days after the wedding, holding his phone with a strange expression on his face. "Janet, you need to see this." "What is it?" "Someone recorded what happened at the wedding. It's everywhere." He showed me his phone screen. The video had millions of views, and the comments were brutal. "This Bridezilla is absolutely vile, excluding a child with hearing aids. Disgusting. I hope my son never meets a woman like this gold digger. OMG, I went to high school with her. She was always a bully. So glad she got her karma." The grandmother is a queen for cutting off funding. That bride got exactly what she deserved. "Wow," I breathed, scrolling through hundreds of similar comments. "Diana's gonna hate this." "There's more," Henry said grimly. "Look at this." He showed me Diana's social media accounts, all deleted. Then news articles. "Wedding disaster goes viral. Bride excludes disabled child, and Bridezilla's meltdown costs family everything." I don't feel sorry for her. A week later, Angus called. "Janet," he said, his voice hollow. "I need to apologize. Diana and we're getting divorced." "What happened?" I asked. "We had a massive fight when we got home. I told her she had no right to disrespect my family, especially Jacob. And you know what she said? She said she doesn't care about my family, that you all were just means to an end." I stayed quiet, letting him continue. "When I said I wanted a divorce, that I couldn't be married to someone so vile, she just laughed and said, 'Sure, you're broke now anyway.' Like that's all I was to her, a bank account." "Angus, I'm sorry." "No, Janet, I'm sorry. I chose her over my nephew, over my family. I let her manipulate all of us, and I stood by while she insulted Jacob. There's no excuse for that." He paused. "Have you seen the videos online? Diana's reputation is completely destroyed. She can't go anywhere without being recognized. She's talking about moving to another state." "Come to dinner Sunday," I said. "Jacob's been asking about his uncle Angus." When Angus arrived that Sunday, Jacob ran straight to him with hesitation, chattering excitedly about dinosaurs and chocolate chip pancakes. As I watched my brother hug his nephew tight, his eyes filled with tears, I realized that sometimes the most important lessons come from the smallest teachers. Family isn't about perfection. It's about showing up when it matters and making things right when you've done wrong.
If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and drop a comment below. Don't forget to follow for more content just like this. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time.